In this video, we'll talk about opposite side castling. When kings are castled on the opposite sides of the board, this usually signals the start of aggressive action by both players against the opposing monarch. This kind of position happens in all levels of play, from the amateurs to club players and even to the highest levels of grandmasters. Nevertheless, the basic principles to consider and apply remains the same. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into the principles of opposite side castling. Now, here are strategies to approach the game. First, Pawn Storm. The most straightforward approach is Pawn Storm. We all know the rule. It's dangerous to move the pawns in front of your king as it will weaken one's position and expose the king to danger. However, in opposite side castling, it's the pawns in the other side, away from one's king usually, that's going to have the task to attack the enemy king. So this plan is perfectly acceptable. In this position, both sides will start their attacks with pawns. White will play g4 to g5, h4 to h5, and so on to continue with this pawn storm attack, while black will do so with b7 to b5. Now let us proceed with what happens in the game. White plays h4. Black plays e takes d5, and that is to open up the light square bishop development later on. Knight takes d5. Knight takes d5 by black. Black exchanges the pieces because he lacks some space in the opening. So c takes d5, played by white. E takes d5 doesn't make very much of a sense because it allows bishop to f5 development by black. Okay, so c takes b5 has been played, and we have b5, h5. There you go. White attacks the king side and black attacks the queen side. Bishop d7 has been played by black. H takes g6, f takes g6, king b1, safety first, a5, bishop h6, a4, bishop takes g7, king takes g7, f3, a3. Now we can see the effects of pawn storms. Now what comes next after the pawn storm from both sides? Now that brings us to our next point, and that is either to open up the files, gain some space, or destroy the enemy king-pawn structure to expose the king. Now, let us dig deeper. Open the files for the rook. One of the most common goals of pawn storm is to exchange the enemy's most advanced pawns in the flank so that the files will be open for the rook. This is what white exactly did in this position. He exchanges h pawn to black's g pawn. The plan is to double the rooks in the h file, right? And also play g4 at some point if black plays h5 to continue to put pressure in black's king. And also some other pieces might come to help, like knight to f1 maneuver to e3, and maybe the queen will also swing over to the king side to help in the attack. Now what about black? What is he doing with its pawn storm? This also leads us to another principle, and that is to gain space. Now, if white captures this a3 pawn with b takes a3, that leads us to our second principle, where the file in black side will be open here, the a file. And if that file is opened, white is not going to like what's happening in the position. Okay, the a8 rook will have access to the queen side near the king. And I believe that if that happens, black's attack will be faster. The same is true if white just ignored the a3 pawn. For example, if he plays g3, okay, then obviously a takes b2 still opens the file for black. Now you just saw how effective the pawn storm is opening the file. Now, let me go back. So, for white, the more logical move is b3, to not allow for the files to be open. So what's with the b3? It actually allows black to gain some space and cause dark square weaknesses here for white. So let's continue with the game. Queen e7 Black capitalizes on the dark square weaknesses and wants to go to e5. So queen c3, king to g8, removing the king from the pin. Knight to f1, rook f, b8, knight e3, knight h5, lining to go to g3, rook h2, then knight to g3, and bishop d3. Now this is actually a bad move played by white here, because there is c4. You can't capture because there is a discovered check the king, and this bishop will fall. So bishop needs to go back to f1. C takes b3, and a takes b3. Now, if queen takes the pawn here, with queen takes b3, then there is b4 and bishop to a4. Okay, so he needs to take that with the a pawn. Now, what just happened? Now that brings us to number 4, or to the fourth principle, should we say, destroying the enemy king pawn structure and trying to expose the king. Black just almost did that. He may have not exposed the king, or should we say the white's king, in this position to attack, but he has created a strong pass pawn in the a file. Soon the rooks will swing over to the c file here to continue with the attack and help out with the attack. And in this position, black appeared to be faster, and in fact he has the edge in this position. Now listen, it does not mean that gaining space is always better than opening a file, or destroying pawn structure is always better than gaining space, and vice versa. The point is, whoever manages to strike first with whatever strategy he uses gains the upper hand. Okay, so let us see in this second position. In here, white just castled Queenside. So we know in advance the plans of each side, right? White will expand this king side by a pawn storm attack, and black will also do the same in the queen side. So black move here, rook to c8. More common move is a6 and then b5, right? But black wants to create pressure in the already opened c file first, or should we say a semi-open c file. So bishop to b3, knight takes d4, bishop takes d4, b5. There you go. Black starts to proceed with his attack, and white will also do the same with h4, a5, a3, b4, a takes b4, a takes b4, knight to d5. This move tries to exchange the dark square bishop on g7, because this typically a strong bishop or a strong defender in there in a PN shadowed setup. So the pawn storm becomes easier to execute for white if that bishop on g7 is going to be exchanged. So black plays knight takes d5, bishop takes g7, king takes g7. This is a critical moment for white now to decide which piece to capture the d5 knight. Queen to d5 allows bishop e6 at some point. Okay, bishop takes d5 is soft due to queen a5, and then this queen needs to move somewhere, so the check is played. Queen d4 check, then there is e5, and queen has to go back somewhere, maybe to e3, and then there's a powerful move, rook to c3. Of course, rook to d3 is not a good move, because there's queen a1, and this king move, then this other rook will fall. So let me go back. So after, for example, rook to c3, of course you can capture that, right? There's checkmate there, and the other rook will move to b file. Okay, so this queen will move after the rook c3. This queen will move somewhere, like queen to g5, h6, queen to g3, and after the check on a1, this is a devastating attack. already for black, an overwhelming advantage for him against the white pieces. Okay, so let me go back. Okay, so e takes d5 is the better move here, because after queen a5, also protecting the b4 pawn, queen to d4 check, king g8. Now, there is no e5 here because of the en passant on e6. That's also the advantage of taking the d5 with the pawn, okay? So, after king g8, then there's h5. Bishop to a4 has been played by black. Now, this is a bad move because after h takes g6, f takes g6. Now, white plays a brilliant sack here with rook takes h7. Okay, king takes the rook, rook h1, king to g8, rook h8 check, king goes to f7. Okay, queen to f4 check. What happens next? King to g7, queen h6 check, queen f7. Now, before I proceed, now we can see here that white was successful in executing the strategies we talked about. The pawn storm attack led to opening of the file of the rook and also destroying the pawn structure to expose the enemy king. So queen h7 check, king to e8 is a free pawn here. Queen takes g6 check. Where's the king going? King d7, queen to e6 check, king c7. Rook takes rook here, rook takes f8, rook takes f8, and what happens next is queen takes e7 check, bishop to d7, and queen takes the rook. That ends up to extra 3 pawns for white. And the game is far from over, as white will still have to grind down to get the win, the position to get the win. Okay, but for this game, he manages to strike first and converted it to his advantage. Now, maybe you say, okay, I get it. With opposite side castling strategies that we talked about is not enough. Speed is also important. We also must execute it fast. So maybe the question now is, how can I strike first? How to attack faster? Remember the rook takes h7, brilliant move by white in this game. So let me give you a tip. Naturally, in opposite side castling, such sharp positions require energetic play. The initiative becomes very important here. The sacrifice of a pawn or two to place the opponent in the defensive end is a no-brainer for an experienced master. So we should learn how to think that way. Let's check this position. Take note, whoever strikes first will be well on his way to victory. In this position, black threatens to get his attack rolling with b5 to b4, opening the queenside files. However, white, who has the move in this position, will strike first with g6. And after h takes g6, h5 when black is placed in the unsavory role of a defender. The h file will be ripped open for the rook, and also the queen will swing over to the king side to help in the attack. Alright, time to test your skill with opposite side castling. Now, this is a game between Michael Adams and former world champion Garry Kasparov, who plays black. In this position, white managed to open up the g file, and have some pressure there on the king side. Okay? And so is black with the b file and also have some pressure on the queen side. Here, Mickey played knight to b3 to neutralize the pressure by one of the black's pieces in the queen side. Can you guess what Kasparov played here? You can pause the video and analyze. Alright, thanks for taking the time. The best move is knight takes c2. Congratulations if you saw that move. Again, in this kind of position, it's all about energetic play, tempos, playing with initiatives, threats in mind, and even tactics like this to place the opponent in a defensive role. So after knight takes c2, white captures the c5 knight first, but there is knight to a3, taking advantage of the pin on this b2 pawn, and in between move, a switch shinzug, remember? So king a2 has been played by white, and only then black captures the c5 knight. Okay, if b takes a3, bishop will just take the knight on c3, and this is powerful here with the rook b2 coming. Okay, so white plays knight to a4. And then there's another brilliant move here with knight to c2. Now, if knight takes c5, then rook takes b2 is checkmate, right? So there are other moves here like rook to b1. If rook to b1 is played, obviously, rook takes b2, rook takes rook, queen a3, check, a powerful move, and that's going to be followed by rook to c8 later on to just protect the knight, and this is winning for black. So let me go back in the game. White played king to b1, and after queen to a3, white resigns because white's king is too exposed to be defended. Because after, for example, a possible move, queen takes c2, there's rook f to c8, and it is still over for white. Now the knight is hanging, and there's a capture on b2 later on. And that will do it for opposite side castling. Now, always remember, it's not just about the attack. It's also about the speed of doing it. I hope you picked up something and apply it to your games.
Hey, check this video out to make sure that you get more important information to bring your chess to the next level.